Hello, beautiful people. I am Uber Jester, and we are back again for another Jester Tech. So, we are going to be covering one of the boogeymen of Standard right now. Everybody is talking about people looping Nexus of Fate and taking all the turns and stripping all the fun out of Magic, and that's what it's about. That's what this deck is. I call it Fog, but it's got a ton of names. Turbo Fog. And for those of you who are new, Fog is a reference to a card long ago that cost 1 green. It was an instant, and it did the same thing that we have with Root Snare right here. It prevented all the combat damage that would be dealt that turn. And so anything that has that effect of preventing damage, like we see here in Pause for Reflection and Root Snare, essentially is colloquially known as Fog. Which I've managed to remove a Root Snare here. So, what we're looking at here is a deck that's sole purpose is to survive long enough to cast Nexus of Fate. And Nexus of Fate, like I said, the boogeyman of Standard right now. Take an extra turn, shuffle it back in if it goes to your graveyard from anywhere. So you can't be milled out. The only way you're getting rid of this is exile things like Devious Cover-Up, Syncopate, those kind of things. It doesn't even sit in the graveyard for a second like some of the cards in the past that would give you an instant speed option to respond to the trigger. It just is a replacement effect. If it would happen, shuffle it in. And that can be important in some cases. So we're looking to survive. We're looking to get to a state of the game where our deck is extremely small and we're drawing multiple cards per turn, or we have several extra turns banked up. Because, if I cast 2 of these in one turn, I get not only another turn, but then once that one's done, I get another one after that. So I get multiple shots at drawing into Nexus of Fate. And this is the current boogeyman of Standard by a mile. It is polarized which decks you can and can't play. There's so many fun decks out there that would be great to play. I mean, I've gone through a couple of dozen already where I'm playing around and I'm having fun, and I just can't beat Nexus of Fate. I can't beat freaking Fog. Oh my gosh, it's so frustrating. And there's variants of this that have come out. The most recent variant actually takes the gate build we covered in the past and modifies that into a Nexus build. So not only are you playing the 4-color gates where you get Gates Ablaze as your sweeper and your way to deal with it instead of something like Settle the Wreckage or Cleansing Nova, but you also get this other option of Gatebreaker Ram to beat down the house, and you get actual ramp spells. So this is typically referred to as Turbo Fog. And the reason for that was you would actually run ramp spells. Well, the reason I didn't call this one Turbo Fog is we don't really run any ramp spells in the previous version. And then a little thing happened called Ravnica Allegiance. And this little uncommon here that everybody swore up and down was a rare gets printed. And this card absolutely changed the success rate and the way that this deck is not only built, but the way that it is played. In the past, on 4, we might be looking at something like Circuitous Routes to get us some extra mana and get to that 7-mana Nexus of Fate, 1 or 2 turns faster. And now, we can just cast it on turn 5. Just play this, cast it on turn 5, probably draw a card, off one of our 2-mana draw spells. And it gets even worse than that because they gave us ramp at a lower cost too. So there's the possibility we're starting to loop turns on 4, or we're starting to loop turns, even just so much mind-bogglingly faster than we previously could. And I think 4 might be the fastest that you could do it, but holy cow, it's so quick, and you need so much less to go right now because you have this out. Previously, we were looking at trying to get to 7, maybe setting up an end-of-turn untap with Teferi, and again, we'll cover all these cards once we get there, and maybe doing it on 6, You know, if you had a good day, you did it on 5. You know, and that's a real good day. But now standard is 5, and a good day is 4, and that one turn is huge. So let's cover the cards real quick, and then we'll kind of go back and look at how everything plays together. Now, this is my version. Like I said, there are a lot of versions of these out there. This one still assumes that we're playing best of 1, because in the best of 1 format, this deck is definitely more successful because it forces the deck to already have pre-boarded answers. In best of 3, you're going to have people targeting your enchantments. The control decks are just going to bring in every counterspell they can get their hands on so that they can put you on the back foot. Every discard spell, you're going to see those get loaded up, and now all of a sudden, instead of there maybe being a token 3 or 4 discard spells or 1 or 2 enchantment removals for so counter spells, now the decks are going to have 8 discard spells, 8 counter spells, 6 ways to deal with your enchantments. And so in best of 3, it definitely gets weaker. I just want to point out, though, when I say it gets weaker, the deck is still really, really good in best of 3. I've lost to it several times with some of my other builds that just can't deal with the fact that it's like, oh, well, you know, turn 4, I hit Wilderness Reclamation. Do you have a way to, you know, destroy an enchantment? No. Okay, turn 5, I'm going to take a turn, and then I'm going to play Teferi and untap and take a turn, and then I'm going to play, you know, draw a card and then draw a bunch of cards with Chemister's Insight and then take a turn, and then I'm going to take 2 turns, and then I'm going to take 2 more turns. All right, now that I've got 6 turns built up here, I'm going to, you know, draw 15 extra cards or whatever. So, yes, in best of 1, I think it is probably one of the best decks that you can be playing. And in best of 3, I think the Gates version is honestly better. It's a little more versatile. And it may be good in best of 1. I have not tried out the Gates version of Nexus of Fate. So let's go over the cards. So this is real simple. Best of 1 was dominated by red and is still seeing a decent chunk of red, although the 9 out of 10 matches is kind of gone by. This was just something you had to do. You had to gain a little life. You replace the card. It's good. We still play this because even in a lot of decks, it's a cheap cycle, and that few extra life can mean an extra turn. We obviously have our cheapest fog that we can play. We play the full 4, and that's what it does. This just says, you know, skip your combat. Let's move on. We'll try again next turn. Thanks for playing. Growth Spiral, another Ravnica Allegiance card to come out. Gives us a 2-mana ramp spell. Yes, if this was Explore, it would still be good. You would still play it. You would still be happy in this deck. However, the fact that it's an instant actually does matter. And once we get to the Teferi untapping, Wilderness Reclamation, the shenanigans that you can do with that, you'll see why it being an instant actually makes a pretty big deal. Although, if this was Explorer, you would still just play it. We've got 1 Knight of Autumn. So this 1 Knight of Autumn is kind of your catch-all. Giant 4/3 if you need to block or draw something out of them. You know, maybe you can get them to hit this with a Vraska's Content before you play your Planeswalkers. More often than not, against the red decks and the white decks, this is just game 4 and, you know, chump block something. Against opposing decks, you have a main deck answer to Wilderness Reclamation or commonly played Search for Azcanta, which we do not play in our version. Card's great, and, you know, maybe we should be playing it, but it got the axe at one point. So this is just a one-of, just a catch-all. You know, does a lot of good, but isn't 100% necessary. We got 3 Gifts of Paradise. Again, gain a little bit of life against the red decks, the white decks, you know, those kind of things. Gives you a little bit extra time, and also ramps you. This lets you cast turn 4 Teferis and then untap with 3 mana on the same turn, which means you can cast, you know, Pause for Reflection or Root Snare, or Growth Spiral, Revitalize. You can do all of that. And later on, it lets you cast, you know, if you have like 2 of them, you can untap with 4 mana. If you have Wilderness Reclamation, it's just 1 more turn faster. So if you go turn 3 this, turn 4 Wilderness Reclamation, you actually are going to untap all 4 of your lands, and you can float 1, so you'll have 6 mana. Nothing you can really do with 6 other than we've got 1 card that we'll talk about later, but it gives you a lot of options, a lot of extra mana. 2 Paws of Reflection. So this is another fog. It has Convoke. That's irrelevant. Cost 1 more. We still play 2. We want 6 fogs. I think originally I had 7. I found that maybe wasn't necessary with all the life gain. You could kind of like pseudo fog by gaining 3 here and gaining 3 here and gaining 4 here. You could fog, a mid-turn essentially. So now you just need the 2 reflections. The cool thing about this is that your opponent thinks you're on fog. So one of the things to really keep in mind, and this goes back and forth for me. I play 1, I play 2, I play 3, Settle the Wreckage, and I'm constantly moving back and forth on this. You don't want to wait necessarily until the point that you're at 3 or 4 life and you're forced to fog any 1 or 2 creatures that attack. And the reason for that is you need to keep your life total high enough that your opponent has to commit a lethal amount of creatures in the numbers of 3 or 4 or 5 so that you can catch them off guard with a settle and take care of multiple threats. It'll take longer to rebuild, that kind of thing. You can sometimes settle if you do it correctly and buy yourself not just 1 turn, but sometimes 2 or 3 turns while they try and build back up. And if you catch them with a settle, and then the next turn they do a huge build back, you have Wrath of God. You can clean back off and buy yourself again 1 or 2 or 3 turns. Like I said, this goes back and forth. You can play 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4. I think 4 might be too much, but I'm constantly on the fence with how many of these should get played. And it changes every time I sit down to play this deck. If I'm up against a lot of Golgari, I want multiple of these. If it's a lot of red, it's a little expensive. They don't care about their creatures. If I'm facing nothing but white, then I want these guys all day long. So it's just kind of what's happening in the meta, what you expect that'll determine the number here. If you're up against control, you obviously want almost none of these, that kind of thing. Up next, another card that's fluctuated over the time that we've played this is Chemist's Insight. You're all probably familiar with this. 4 mana, draw 2. It's got Drunk Start, so we can discard a card and cast it out of our graveyard. We get to a point where we just have infinite lands in our hand that we can't possibly play them fast enough, so we can pitch those to draw 2 more and get more shots at drawing Nexus of Fate. The more redundant card draw, the more speed and deck velocity that we have, the faster we can get to a critical, I don't even want to say mass, but it's like a critical minimum mass to where we can consistently draw Nexus of Fate. And Chemist's Insight's just the best at that. I think I started with 2, and then I played 3, and I just found myself time after time after time with Wilderness Reclamation wanting to have more Chemist's Insight. I just wanted, in a turn, draw 4. Main phase, draw 4. Untap, draw 4. I want to be doing that all the time. So Wilderness Reclamation, we've talked about this. Beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. This card, you cast it for 4, and that turn it untaps. If you're playing instants in your deck, which we've got a few of those, this card's just free. For free, double your mana every turn after this one. How busted. And it's on an enchantment, which is not a commonly targeted card type. Although it has become, because of this card, like there's always been tons of enchantment answers. But in most sideboards, you'll see 1 or 2. Nobody plays the main deck unless they're attached to a card that also does something else relevant. It's just nobody cared about enchantments. Well, they've been forced to now. They've had their hands pushed and tied and all of the different metaphors. They have to have an answer to enchantments, or this card will absolutely 100% spell your doom. Granted, we only play 3. Yes, they are fine in multiples. However, it's not necessary to have them in multiples. So I want to draw 1, and I don't want 2 in my opening hand pretty much ever. I need the card Velocity, things like Growth Spiral, Revitalize, Gift of Paradise, the things that are going to get me to critical mass mana. This could be wrong. I'm willing to listen. If you think I'm wrong, leave a comment down below. This deck is so incredibly complicated in its build, even though the total plan of the deck is utterly simple. The total way that you play it is utterly simple. There's like 3 or 4 rules. Hey, do this before you do this. I think, honestly, when you talk about the difficulty of a well, this is a combo deck, I guess. So the difficulty of a combo deck or a control deck typically is very high, and newer players shouldn't do this. I think I can honestly sit down and teach a newer player, not a new player. I think for a new player, this is the concept of how this deck works is very difficult. But for a newer player, somebody who's been playing for a couple of months, 6 months, maybe even a year, I think I can explain how this deck works, and you could even watch this video and be a fairly competent Fog player. Yes, it does take time to master, to know which cards to play when, those kind of things, but that's always going to be the case. I believe that this deck, though, is atrociously difficult to build. In these three colors, in the Bant colors of green, white, and blue, you have an abundance of cards that matter in this deck. We're playing only 6 Fogs. We could play 8. We've got 3 Gift of Paradise. We could play a 4th one. 1 Night of Autumn. How about 2? How about 3? 1 Cellular Wreckage. We talked about that. That could be anywhere from 1 to 4. There is an unbelievable amount of deck choices when it comes to building the deck. I've settled on 3 because the second one is nice but not needed. The third one is typically unused. So it's not as bad as like Experimental Frenzy, where the second one is just actively bad, but it still has these massively diminishing returns. We've got a 1-of Karn in here. Karn kind of pulls double duty. He's a pseudo draw. He lets you just see more cards. Has a ton of loyalty, which is nice. And eventually he's your win con. Yes, you can win in this deck the old-fashioned Teferi way, but Karn also helps speed that up, so you don't have to play an hour-long game of decking your opponent after you've removed all of their permanents and taken infinite turns. You can also get stuck in loops where the Teferi trick doesn't work. Maybe you lost 2 Teferis early, and now you've only got the 1, which I guess that still works. So yes, if you don't want the game to take 2 hours, we have 1-of Karn, and he has some other uses as well. We're playing 2 Cleansing Novas, as opposed to 2 Settles and 1 Cleansing Nova. Honestly, I like the 2 Cleansing Novas because I want one that I can set to creatures, and then the second one I can cast for enchantments, or vice versa. There's several decks out there that run quite a few artifacts. There's several decks that run quite a few enchantments. And then, all of the decks that aren't those run a ton of creatures, with the exception of a couple control decks, which have gotten more popular here as of late. But again, this is another card, 1, 2, 3, something like that. I don't think this one would ever be the full 4, much like Settle. I think that's just a little too much. I can see this one going down. Again, leave a comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts are. How would you change what you've seen so far? We've got 3 Teferi. The first one's great, and usually dies. The second one's great, mostly survives, because by then you start taking turns. The third one is a nice backup for if you want to minus this guy straight at 8 so that you don't have to worry about it. And the fourth one would be absolutely atrocious. So we've gone to 3. You should be pretty familiar with this guy by now. He's great. He does all the things you want, and he does them a lot, and he's perfect. So I play 1 Prying Eyes. It's 6 mana. You discard 2 cards, but you draw 4 of them. It's an instant speed. That is a lot of cards. I see a lot of people playing precognitive something. Let's just look it up. Yeah, precognitive perception. It's 5 mana instant. Draw 3 cards. So it's technically 1 more card, raw card, and it has the addendum, so if you cast it as a sorcery, you get to scry 3. This may be better. It costs 1 less. But I have been playing 1 Prying Eyes, and I've liked it. I've liked it a lot. The 4th card is nice. There's no tension. Should I cast this as a sorcery? Should I cast it as an instant? I think you could play either one of these. I think there's a valid argument for either one of these. Again, that's comment worthy. You know, like I said, this deck is very difficult to build. And if you want to play precognitive perception, I don't think anybody's going to say you're wrong. I'm certainly not. And, you know, if you're trying to shave on rares in this deck, because, it's got the Teferis and the Cleansing Nobles and the Settle and the Karn, and, it's got several rares. If you want to cut on rares, you can play Prying Eyes. I've enjoyed playing Prying Eyes. It's done really well for me. Like I said, I may be wrong. I'll probably have to try, playing... Maybe I play 3 Chemistry's Insight and 2 Precognitive Perception. Like I said, the choices on this deck are just infinite. We are only playing 3 Nexus of Fate. Why are we only playing 3 Nexus of Fate? Because when you're about to loop 100 million turns in a row, it doesn't really matter if you have 4 or 3. However, when you start an opening hand that has 2 Nexus of Fates, it's awful. Now, one of the things that I've been looking at, I haven't done this yet, but it is on my list to see how well it's going to work, is the Sphinx from Ravnica Allegiance, which apparently I have none of. Sphinx of Foresight. So if you have this in your opening hand, you get to scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. That could be huge. And we're going to try this one for sure in a build. I don't know if it's this build, and I don't know what that means for how I build it. I don't think it means I get to cut on Nexus of Fate, but it may mean I get to cut on, Pause for Reflection or something like that. This card's ability to scry 3 in your opening hand, I think, is being severely, severely, severely underplayed. And I am super interested to check it out. I'm trying to find the right shell for it. I don't know if this is it. If it is, I'll let you know. The lands are pretty straightforward. We got 2 plains, an island, and a forest, and then, virtual maximum of all of the possible duels and everything. And we run 1 Field of Ruin because Search for Azcanta, out of the opposing Fog decks, can put them ahead of you, and we're not playing it. So we want to have an answer for it. They typically only play 1 or 2. If you can answer one with a Wilderness Reclamation, it can buy you some time, that's for sure. The fact that you're not out mana, you get to untap. It gives you another thing to do with it. I see some versions playing Arch of Araska. That's probably good. I don't think I ever evolved this into that point where that's what I'm going to play. You get to City's Blessing relatively easy. I mean, typically you have 5-6 lands in play, and then, a Teferi or a Karn, Wilderness Reclamation. There's plenty of permanents that, even though 10 permanents seems like a lot, you get there pretty quick with this deck. So maybe Arch is perfect. Like I said, anything that lets you use that mana, you've got this Wilderness. I think if you're going to play Arch from Araska, though, then you need to be playing 4 Wilderness Reclamations because you're going to want that mana. 6 mana to draw a card is a lot of mana. I like it better than I do Search for Azcanta, though. It doesn't take up a card slot. Yes, it's not as efficient. Yes, it's not as powerful. But the fact that it, takes up virtual card slots is a pretty big deal. And that's the problem with Sphinx of Foresight in this deck, is that you'd want to play 4, and it takes up 4 real card slots. So I first off have to be able to cut 4 cards, and if does that make the deck better? I don't know yet. That's definitely on the testing block. This though is the Fog of Fate, Turbo Fog, the Fog deck, Public Enemy #1, one of the 2 most polarizing decks in Standard right now. It is mind-boggling that this deck exists after so many years, and how incredibly good it is right now. We will probably take a look at the Gates version of this on our stream. So if you're interested in seeing this in action, or a version of this in action, check us out Friday night on the stream. It'll be rebroadcast on YouTube next week. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you like this content. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if there's any decks you'd like to see me kind of build, break down, anything you've been trying to work on. Corrections on this deck, because like I said, I think there's a million ways to build this one. I'd love to hear your input on it. I'm constantly refining this deck. This is my pet deck. I've got one other pet deck, and then I've got these other decks that I play to get my wins. And these are the ones that I tweak, and I look for ways to get that advantage, and I have fun building. And I'd love to hear any of your input you have for something I overlooked, or if you think I'm an idiot and you're just like, oh my god, you're not playing 4 of these, what is wrong with you? Let me know. I'll give it a try, or I'll respond back. Hey, I tried that, and this is how I felt about it. This is why it's the way it is. That kind of thing. Also, if you're wanting to keep up, we do new videos every Tuesday. I'm going to be adding videos on Thursday here shortly. As you can see from the channel, this is like video number 5. So, we're not exactly up and running with a million videos, but I think I'm going to try and add a Thursday video as well. That will probably be a stream recap most of the time, but it may also be special information, maybe other deck techs, or, little things that I've come across, little combos, maybe just explaining certain combos. So, hit that bell icon if you want to get those notifications. Come check us out on Twitch, Friday nights at 7, Sundays at 11 Central Time. If you're interested in any of these decks in action, if you want to see this one, and you want to hear more of the doggos in the background, be sure to check out Twitch and that subscribe button. Guys, that's all I've got for right now. Love to hear more feedback from you, not only on the deck, but on the videos as well. This is very new to me, and so I'm trying to get a handle on it. I'd like to know what you'd like to see, what you hate to see, what you like, what you don't, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. Should I put the cam on for this? I've got it off now, but we do run it on the stream, so I could run the cam for this, but I kind of wanted the extra room on the screen. Give me your yeses, give me your nos, and I will see you next time. This is Jester signing out. Enjoy what's left of your day. Peace.